Good morning, friends, and welcome to Robertson Wesley. My name is Reverend Karen Bridges, and today I am so excited to be here in our sanctuary. I want to show you a bit about all the different things in the church. Maybe you've wondered what that was or what that name means. Maybe you've heard words that you don't understand. And so I'm hoping today, as we go on a tour of things, that you will learn more about things that are sacred to us. So I am going to give you a full view of what we call our sanctuary. The sanctuary is a place where, in the church, it is a very sacred space where we worship God. This is the place where we spend time in worship. And it is a glorious space, and it's rather large. This building itself was built in 1914, which means this space is over 100 years old. And originally, it was a Presbyterian church, and then in 1925, it became the United Church, part of the United Church of Canada. You'll see directly ahead the organ, but even before that, is this beautiful chandelier that reaches up into the high ceiling. What I love about this particular sanctuary is the beauty of the stained glass with the dark wood. It's so well built and so well maintained, and it's just such a very sacred, special place. So as I said, this whole area that we are in, that I just showed you, is what we call the sanctuary, a place of worship, a place where we experience the sacred mystery of God and the Spirit in our lives, a place where we typically gather as people of God. Now, right now, I am standing in the balcony. This is the balcony of the church. So as you can see, there are edges, and if we walk down a little bit closer, you can see it can be quite steep at times. I'm going to give you the bird's eye view. So we see sanctuary and look down, look way down, and then back up. Hello, Sebastian and Sienna. It's so nice to see you. So this is the balcony, and the balcony is where a lot of people like to sit because it gives you a great view of what's happening during worship time. Some people like the balcony because they can hide a little bit more. It's a really great place to play hide and seek as well. So this sanctuary itself can hold over 650 people, and it's quite exciting in my mind. But I'm going to show you how to get back down to the main area. And as we go, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about things in the sanctuary. So we are moving into the stairwell right now. I'm going to show you, there is this other little ladder. That ladder leads up to the bell tower. And the bell tower is a place where we hear the chimes from our carillon at noon every day for about 5 minutes, where it plays different pieces of music that are often attributed to our hymns, but tend to be kind of classical music. The door we're coming up to is the main door of the church. This is where most people walk into our church. Peeky outside. See? We're outside. Let's go back in. So this is the view that you would have as you're walking into the church through the main door. And as we are walking in, we're in the stairwell presently, but we are about to walk into this area. Does anybody know what this area is called? This area, which is kind of that welcoming space, a place where you are greeted by ushers, this is what we call the narthex, or the vestibule. So it is the space that leads us into what would be the sanctuary, or I'm going to teach you another new word called the nave, the nave. But while we're in the narthex, that's where we are right now. As you can see, this is where people put their coats. There's a few benches for people. There's often water here, and then a whole bunch of these piles of plates is what they look like. What is this? What is this? It is called an offering plate. During worship, we traditionally have passed the plate. The plate gets passed from person to person to share what they can with God, their gifts, their offering. An offering is often money, although we offer ourselves and our time and our gifts to God as well. And that happens during the worship service, which I talked about a couple of weeks ago. We talked about what worship is. So that is the article that we use to pass back and forth, up and down the pews, which I will get to in a minute, to collect our money. So this is also a fun place to run through, and there's stained glass windows everywhere. So we are now going to enter. So I will back up so you can see again. So we are going to enter into the nave. This is the nave of the church. And the nave is basically where all of the pews are, where all of the people sit on a Sunday morning or any other time when we worship God. So I will show you how that is spelt. It is the nave. Now you get a good view of all of the pews. And just so you know, we were standing way up there on that very top pew by that big stained glass window. And isn't that beautiful? Stained glass windows is a tradition that many churches have had for many, many, many years. And like I said, they tell stories from the Bible, but with pictures, usually depicting different scenes of stories. And we have many in our church, which is quite lovely. So like I said, we are standing in the nave. And the things that we tend to sit on are what we call the pews. And a pew is basically a church bench where people can come together, gather, sit, and worship. And within a bench, we also have our hymn books. Yeah, flip you around again. Sorry if you're getting confused here. But you will notice that in our pews, we have a few things. We have two hymn books. One is called More Voices. This is the most recent hymn book that we use. And the other one is actually Voices United. And it clearly needs to be fixed. And Voices United is the hymn book that we've been using for many years. Beside that, we have a pamphlet that will tell people a little bit about what our church is. There are some offering envelopes. This is where people can put their money, and if they record it, then they get a tax receipt. We also have information cards. These are the yellow information cards we've been talking about that people can fill out to leave us some information and find out about things that happen in the church. And then some of you might be wondering, what are these? These are replacements for physical money, physical cash that can be placed in the offering plate for people who have money that is given to the church through their banks. It's called pre-authorized remittance. PAR cards is what we call them. So people put these in as a symbolic gesture of the gifts that they are also giving to God during worship. So that's just a little bit about what's in the pews. The main thing in the pews, all of you, it's the people. The people are the ones in the pew. All right, are you ready to find out more about those crazy words in our sanctuary? Now, what's the sanctuary again? It's this whole sacred space. All right, I'm gonna flip you around one more time. All right, moving forward, we have one of the most central things in the church, this big block, this movable table. Now, this table has some words on it, and it says, do in remembrance of me. This is what we do in remembrance of me. So what do we do in remembrance of somebody? That would be called communion. And so this table is our communion table, but it's also referred to as an altar. An altar is a sacred space where people offer things to God or their own gods, and some different faith traditions have different gods. Now, also on this table, you will notice that we have a silver plate, which is actually called a paten, and we have a chalice or a wine glass, which we call a chalice. Now, the chalice and the paten are what we use for communion. So I'm sure you remember that communion is one of the two sacraments we have here at the church. And a sacrament is that moment where we feel God's sacred presence, the invisible presence that is made visible in what we do. It's a ritual. And our communion ritual is one that Jesus taught us at the Last Supper, where we take bread and wine, and when we eat and drink of it, we are remembering what Jesus did for us in this world, the sacrifices that he made, and all of his teachings and healings and wonderful sayings. So we do that frequently at the church to remember Jesus in our lives. So that's the chalice, that's the paten, and then we have our communion table, which we also call an altar. And all of this is still in our sanctuary, but this table and then moving up with that whole railing there, the other side of this is called the chancel. It is called the chancel. And I honestly can't remember where I put my word. Where did I put my word? So you can see how it's spelled. So where I'm going right now is the chancel. So this is where the ministers, the choir, anyone in leadership, there we go. This is a chancel. So you will see that where the communion table is, where this thing is that I'll talk about in a second, and then where all of this is, with that kind of invisible floor there to the first pew. From the pew back is the nave. From the pew forward is the chancel. The chancel. So what are we looking at right here? What is this thing that we see? This is what we call the pulpit and the lectionary. So what makes it a pulpit and what makes it a lectern? A pulpit is where a minister or a priest actually tells or shares a sermon. So the time where we reflect on the scriptures from our worship service and we proclaim to the people the good news of God. This is also, though, where we read the Bible. And so when the Bible is read, this is called the lectern, because it is the place where the scripture is spoken from. So I'm going to show you, this is our big Bible that we read from on Sunday mornings. So you're getting a view from where I usually stand, which is quite lovely, where you can see all of the people around you. It's pretty colorful and pretty amazing when you look around. So this is the whole sanctuary. I am standing right now in the chancel. Now, right behind me is the organ. So we're going to go take a look at the organ. But first, we are going to walk into the choir loft. The choir loft is a place where the choir gathers to sing our anthems and to help us with our hymns, sings. They're there to be our musical support on a worshipful Sunday. We have some pictures of the people in the choir. But this is the organ. And it's quite a beautiful instrument, really. When you look at it, it's got all sorts of pipes and different things. In fact, it even has this really great, I'm going to go low, so you can see all of the pedals, pedal bass. Those are the things that make the really low notes. So we're in the choir loft. We're now looking out. We can see the pulpit. We can see the nave. We can see the balcony. You with me so far? Awesome. All right, we're going to head out. You'll see that we have little doors here so that people don't hurt themselves. Little doors, close. And we're going to walk down another staircase here. We can see in the distance what we call the chapel. Now you might wonder, what is the difference between a chapel and a sanctuary? A sanctuary is the main space or the big gathering space where we worship God, whereas the chapel is often off to the side of a sanctuary, and sometimes it's on its own as well. But the chapel is typically a smaller space where special services can happen, but also where people can do some personal meditation, where they have a chance to really reflect and to worship God on their own and in quietness. So we're going to take a closer look at our chapel. The chapel itself wasn't built until 1940s, after the war, and that's why it's called the Memorial Chapel. And on here, we have a plaque with lots of names, and these are all the names of the people who reside in our memorial garden. So people who have passed away. We have a place for them outside our church, for this is what they feel is their spiritual home and where they wanted to spend their eternity. So yeah, it's a beautiful space. What is really cool is up in the rafters. Each of those little squares are completely different and have been carved, which I think is pretty amazing to see, because they're all a little bit different. Now, we're getting closer to where, right now I'm standing in the nave. So even though we don't have pews, we have rows of chairs. And so rows of chairs would indicate the nave. Now, typically, if we were to do a service in this, they would not be facing this direction. They would be turned the other way so that they could see where the pulpit and the lectern is and the communion table. Do you see the communion table? This communion table looks a little bit different. It's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit bigger, but it's pretty cool if you ask me. It's also our communion table and altar. And we also have what we call a candelabra. Candelabras hold more than one candle, which is quite beautiful. And this Bible itself is actually quite old. It's from 1615, and it was a gift to us from Dolly Loan. I don't know if you know, but if you were to walk around the sanctuary, you would find all sorts of interesting plaques with names on it and people who have given so much to this church over the over 100 years that it has been in existence. So I'm going to go back to what we saw as that is the lectern and pulpit. And what's really cool is that we actually have 3 Bibles sitting on our lectern. They tend to collect there, I'm not really sure why. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you in here, oh, and see, we've got a cross. But this, look at this. Do you see the red kind of, and the railing? People actually come up to this and they kneel down on it, and then they can place their hands on here in a prayerful position. I'll see if I can show you. I'm gonna tilt down. So you can see that I'm on my knees and I am praying right now. So this is a kneeler, a place where we can receive communion. Sometimes people would kneel and then place out their hands to receive communion. Sometimes people use it to pray. Lots of different options. I don't know if that's how you've used it. I'm sure the children have used it in a very different way, but that's what that is. Now, in this corner, we have, what is this? What is this? Oh, it's very heavy. What is underneath that? Look at that. Anybody know what that is? We have another one in the church, which I'm going to show you. So keep that in mind. You just saw what was inside that. Some of you may have wondered what this big box is. It's actually another organ. That's right, it's an instrument. It is an organ that plays music. So I'm gonna head out of the chapel. The chapel is often a place where people with children like to be. They don't have to be, but they like to be because there's activities and stuffed animals. I'll show you the stuffed animals. Ding, stuffed animals. We have a little corner for our children and some storybooks and some activity books. Lots of cool things in this place. Now, going back into the sanctuary right in front of me. This is the grand piano, another instrument we use here at the church. Now, some of you might wonder, what is this? It is what we call our wedding table. For weddings, when people have to sign documents, they sit at that table. It's often in a different location. And here we have, again, some more plaques for Doug Milson and for James Robertson, Reverend James Robertson, who is very important to this church. All right, back in the sanctuary, you see the pews, and where I'm standing right now, because I'm closer to the pews, I'm in the nave. That's right, the nave. All right, what is this? Karen, it's a candle. Of course it's a candle, but it's a very special candle. Do you know what this candle is called? It is called the Paschal Candle or the Christ Candle. Why, Karen, is it called a Paschal Candle or the Christ Candle? This candle is what we actually, this is what we light on Easter Sunday to show that Jesus has been resurrected. And then we keep it lit right up until Pentecost, which is a couple weeks away. So we do light it for a long time. We also light it on Christmas Eve because it is specifically to do with Christ's life. The rest of the time, we typically only light the 2 candles that are on the communion table. And we like to get other people involved with that. Now, I've been talking to you about liturgical seasons and have mentioned things like paraments. Right now, there's that cloth with the cross on it that's on the pulpit, and another one, you can see from the side here, that is on our communion table. This is what we call a parament. Parament. So these are things that help to decorate, but also to, like the stained glass windows, teach us a little bit about our faith. So they change in color, and right now we're in the season of Easter, and the color for Easter is white, often with gold just to kind of capture the kingdom of God, I think. So if we look at it a little bit closer, you will notice that there is a cross on there with some vines going around it. And so people like the imagery of having that really bare cross, but at Easter, once Jesus has died and is now resurrected, we add new life to it because Jesus has been transformed. So back in the chapel, we saw a cross, but it did not have a vine and flowers on it. But this one does, so that we remember that we are in the season of Easter, a season of transformation and new life. That's what that is. Now, I showed you that thing in the chapel that had the bowl in it. We have another one here in the sanctuary. Ta-da! What is that, you ask? Well, let's look. Shall we take off the top first? Did you know that this moves? Ugh. And look at that. Another bowl. This is also what we call the baptismal font. So remember on the communion table how we had the paten and the chalice, and that helps us to do one of the 2 sacraments of the United Church of Canada, the sacrament of communion. But this thing with the bowl in it, the baptismal font, helps us to baptize people. So this is where we put the water and then we bless it, and then we use the water to baptize often children or babies, but we baptize all ages here at the church. It doesn't matter how old you are, you can always be baptized. And that's about acknowledging that you are a part of a Christian faith community, that you have been sealed in the love of God. I mean, we truly believe that everyone belongs to God, whether you are baptized or not, that we are all loved. But it is our way as a community to celebrate with each of these individuals and the babies, to celebrate their official coming in to the presence of God in a different way, in a more intentional way, I guess would be a good way of looking at it. Is there anything else I need to show you in this church that you don't know about? Oh, I just saw something else. Have you ever seen this board with the numbers on it? These numbers indicate which hymns we are going to sing. So on one side, you see a VU, which stands for Voices United, and on the other side, an MV, which stands for More Voices. And it always starts in the order. So the very first hymn that we sang, and this was probably back on March 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there, More Voices, number 145 was the first hymn we sang, and then we sang from Voices United, which is that red hymn book, 814, and vice versa. You see where we're going. We also have some flags in our church, and then our stained glass windows. These two tell more about the history of the Protestant faith, John Knox and John Wesley. You'll notice at the back of the nave, we have other stained glass windows that aren't quite the same as the ones around the exterior of our church. These ones actually came from Wesley United Church. So there used to be another church that was down closer to the Oliver School, and that's where Wesley United used to be. We sold that building, and all of the people that were part of that congregation then came and joined Robertson United, which is where we are standing right now, and they joined together in what we call an amalgamation, and we became Robertson Wesley United Church. And so we've used both the resources from that building and the people who have come and the resources here to become who we are today. And it's a great legacy that this church has left us. What else can I show you? What else do you want to know? What else do you want to know? It's a good question. I can show you, remember I was telling you about paraments? We have a picture of a whole bunch of our paraments on the side of our wall here. See, memorial paraments. And so we have the red one. That is for Pentecost Sunday. So in a couple weeks, you're going to notice that it turns red. The purple one is for the season of Lent, which leads us up to Easter. The blue one is Advent, which is the time before Christmas. So the white ones are for Christmas and Easter. Blue is for Advent, which is the beginning of our Christian liturgical year. We hit Christmas, then we move to the season of Pentecost and Epiphany, which is kind of the ordinary time. Then we hit Lent, which is just before Easter. And then after Easter, we head to Pentecost Sunday. And so those are just a few examples of some of the paraments we have. You will notice that all of them have a cross on them. Sometimes people ask, why don't we have a cross in our church? But we do have a cross in our church on our paraments, and we also have one in our chapel. Sometimes we don't notice these things until we look back on them. All right, here are some more stained glass windows. What are the stories, do you think? The one over here, we see a baby. So is that probably the birth of Jesus? Oh, look, there's some wise men there holding some gold and frankincense and myrrh. Next, though, we have another baby, but this time there's John, or a priest, baptizing the child. So we have a baptism window. The next one is the one where Jesus went into the temple when he was a very young boy and he started to teach people, and his parents lost him. They didn't know where he went, but he had gone to the temple. I don't know if you were running away from home or if you left your parents, where would you go? Next to that, we have the baptism of Jesus, or the baptism of John. So Jesus is now baptizing John and vice versa. And then over here, what is that? Is that the devil? This is Jesus being tempted by the devil in the desert. That's right. So you will see that each of these stained glass windows tell amazing stories. And so you really need to look around the whole church in order to find out all of the different stories. And they're artist depictions, so know that it's somebody's interpretation of that. We also have at the back of our sanctuary what we call honor rolls. And so this church was established around the time of the big wars, World War I and World War II. And so we commemorate the people who were members of this church with these plaques and flags and tributes to the people who passed away fighting for our freedom here in the church. So again, we're looking at the back of the nave in the sanctuary. And this again is do you remember the name? It's the narthex. This is where you enter and exit from. So I hope that you have found this time interesting as we've looked around the church and learned a little bit more about things. If you have any other questions about words that we use in the church, or things that we do here, or objects that are here, you can always ask me, send me an email, and I will try and respond as soon as I can. But it's just been such a pleasure to show you and teach you about all these wonderful things. And I look forward to seeing all of you on Sunday. Kids worship will be at 9:30, and then at 10:30 is our regular worship, and I hope you'll join us for both. Really looking forward to it. Take care, friends, and I'm just going to put you down here. I want you to remember that no matter where we are, and whether or not we are together or not, that we are not alone because God loves us. Go in peace and serve this world in love, friends, because that's what we're called to do. Talk to you soon. Bye.